I had mentioned if you were with us earlier in the program today, we've got a very special guest who's joining us. And we're talking terrorism and how you best deal with Islamic terrorism. And we've been dealing with it really going back to the late 1960s and early 70s with hijackings by the PLO and then up through Al Qaeda and a lot of these other organizations and now ISIS. And it just seems that the hand wringing, as Nigel Farage put it the other day, continues, goes on and on and on. And some people would say, especially liberals, there's no military solution. Well, we're joined this morning by Lieutenant Colonel Steve Heil. He is retired from the U.S. Air Force. As I mentioned earlier, he was acquainted with both General Curtis LeMay and General J.C. McConnell during his time in the Air Force, and also served at a time in the Reagan administration, and has a lot of experience around a lot of the best minds in the U.S. military during the course of his lifetime. And first of all, Colonel, we'd like to say welcome back to the program today.
Well, as I always say, it's always good to be back.
Yes, day after day, you wake up, you see the sunshine, you say, all right, things are good.
Things are very good, yes.
you,
Especially if I'm still breathing.
you sent out an email yesterday, and that's, I read it, and I said, gee, we've got to have you on the air today because I've been sitting here listening to all of the usual media gnashing of teeth about this over the course of the weekend, and at some point, you got to say, we either make a decision. Are we going to live this way from here on out, or do we start looking for better solutions to bringing this to an end? And I would assume you've got a couple of things in mind on how we might bring this to a stop.
Well, unfortunately, in my mind, what we have to do is stop doing things as we always have, or as Americans. We may we have to fundamentally change our approach to our security, and we've got to maybe, in some respects, as I would call it, stop being America as we know it, because what's happening is that everything that's good about what has made us who and what we are as a society is now being used against us. And that can't continue because they just continue to take advantage of it. We know who the enemy is now, and there's absolutely no doubt about that. We've had 8 years of a commander-in-chief who wouldn't even use the word Islamist terrorists, but that's exactly what's going on. And so I think if we don't suspend some of those things like profile or start profiling, and we start in some respects violating people's rights as they stand now, because they don't respect them, and if we offend or get the wrong people every now and then, we apologize and say, hey, you're going to benefit from this as much as anybody else, because you're just as much likely to be perhaps killed or involved with the terrorism as it is. So I just think America has to stop being America, not fully, but we just have to do things much differently and approach this situation in ways we probably would have never thought of before.
I was just reading the other day, here in Idaho, we have an old internment camp where Japanese Americans were held during World War II. It's a short drive down the highway, and it's now being turned into it's been a somewhat of a park-like setting, but it's being expanded, and they're using it as a historical teaching tool. And a lot of people say that's a blemish or a stain on the United States. On the other hand, we can say that today because we weren't there in 1942, and we didn't realize the scope that we could have actually lost that war and how bad things would have been if that had happened. And Franklin Roosevelt had to make some decisions, and he had to make them quickly. And we can second guess that, but I almost wonder if we have to take some sort of approach. The difficulty, of course, is Franklin Roosevelt didn't have a media that accused him of I don't know, as they do every step of the way with Donald Trump, of being a Russian plant or a treasonous. But do we need somehow to just simply ignore media and have some folks grow some stones and get this done?
Well, I think the telling thing is that these attackers on Saturday, I mean, they're known terrorists. They've been watched. They've just demonstrated that the one was in the park trying to convert children to radical Islam, and uh, and which I think it's sort of like if you're on an airplane now and you say, "I have a bomb," you go to jail. I think if you say anything that says that I'm for terrorism, I'm for Allah, I'm for Islamic, whatever. Those people need to go to jail, and they need to be confined so they can't do what they are eventually going to do in almost 90% of the cases.
You don't live very far. As far you could drive it in a short period of time from Fairfax, Virginia, where I guess there is one of these mosques where they preach this style of hate right here in the United States. Do we have to
Right.
go in there and close these people down and tell the court basically to take a hike if it disagrees?
I would be all for that, quite frankly. And we've just got to make an impact and get these people attention that this isn't the America that you are taking advantage of by being what we've been before, and you can't rely on that to protect it or hide behind it. We're going to come after you, and if you're innocent and we're wrong, like I say, our apologies and move on, and let the media be damned. you know.
I was reading about the last week or so. I read where the founder of Blackwater says we need somebody in the role of a MacArthur style role in Afghanistan to bring things to an end there, almost like a pro council. Others saying we need to get out. That's the other end of this, though, is that we have boots on the ground in some of the danger hotspots, but because of the current rules of engagement, we simply don't have a lot of control over this. And I would imagine that a military solution wouldn't be very pretty, but it could be better than what we're currently using.
Well, it has to be a combination of military and police forces. We have to also unshackle some of them. It used to be, particularly in New York, if you were suspicious or you saw somebody doing something suspicious, the police could stop you and pat you down. uh, Now they can't do that anymore because we might offend somebody. Uh, I wouldn't be offended if somebody did that because at least it shows that they're being alert and a block down the road there might be a terrorist. So I just, as much as I hate to say it, we've just got to stop being the America that we've been, where we have so much emphasis on individual rights, and because those things now are going to destroy us to the point where we have no rights, and so we've got to change it. And I think they're even seeing that. I guess Prime Minister May has already thrown some things out. One being that she's thinking of outlawing burqas, and some other measure. I think, and I don't remember exact details, but certainly more profiling. We just got to start doing things that turn back on these people what they are using against us, and we're letting them get away with it.
Our guest is Lieutenant Colonel Steve Heil. He's joining us, retired from the U.S. Air Force, joining us this morning on Top Story with Bill Colley on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. We're at 55 at 9:16. When you were referencing in New York, they under at least previous mayors, they had what they called the broken windows policing, patting people down and the like. Going back to World War II, when the 8 Nazi spies were landed on beaches here, and they ended up catching these men in a matter of days. That was because of wartime security, and civil libertarians would have screamed and yelled about it. But again, world war, civilizational war going on. Uh, we apparently just can't seem to bring people together today. Maybe we'll never be as united again, but the fact of the matter is, there were security procedures in place. The old line was, "Don't you know there's a war going on?" It just seems we can't get that through the noggins of some of these people today.
Well, that's exactly right. It's because we've been told for 8 years we're not at war with Islam, but we are at war with Islam, and in varying forms. And if we don't recognize that, that's why I say we have an entirely different enemy now, um, and we know who they are, what they are, and but we're still trying to fight them in the same old way, and it isn't working, and it's not going to work. So I just hope that we maybe start thinking differently and be more creative. And again, if we have to do things that maybe we have to hold our nose and say, okay, this is the way we have to fight this war. And that's what it is. It's a war.
Well, and you think about, and you mentioned, of course, I mentioned at the top of the interview that uh, you knew General Curtis LeMay when he was firebombing Japanese cities. This was even before the atomic bomb. He knew that incendiary bombs would take out the style of housing they had, and the notion was it was not nice, but it would hasten the end of the war. And again, it wasn't done for public relations; it was done to win.
Yeah, and of course we did the same thing in when they firebombed Dresden and Germany. I mean, they were phosphorus bombs, and we almost burned it to the ground, almost like Tokyo. War is not a pretty thing, but you can't win it halfway. You either have to win it all together, or it never ends. And that's where we are now. We're trying to play both sides, and it just doesn't work. We just have to get the mentality that we are at war, and we have to do whatever it takes to eradicate the enemy.
Well, Colonel, always good speaking with you, and look forward to doing it again sometime soon. I was going to say,
Okay.
you need to write a book so the next time we do this, I can plug the book on the air.
Okay, I'll get busy on that.
All right. Say hello to the family.
I will. Okay, Bill. Thanks.
Take care, sir. Lieutenant Colonel Steve Heil joining us this morning on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and NewsRadio1310.com, offering his thoughts on how we could bring this war. And he said it is a war with Islam, how we could bring it to a much quicker conclusion. We're at 55. We've got more coming up. Also, we'll be talking a bit more today about, speaking of whining media, about the Paris Climate Accord. That's on the way as well. Plus, more of your telephone calls on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and NewsRadio1310.com.